Welcome to Grapho Citizen. This is your host, Josue Briseno, CEO of HRCitizen.com, founded in 2019 in Seattle, Washington. As you know, we are transforming the HR model across the globe using graphology, and we strive to help organizations and leaders adopt and embrace HR transformational initiatives complemented by graphology. Welcome back to another amazing podcast, and thank you for watching us and showing interest. Special thanks to Somegraph for the strategic alliance and partnership with HRCitizen.com. We have created a new concept called Grapho Citizen, where we stream live international keynote speakers to spread out the word of human resources and graphology. Today, we have an amazing speaker from India, Namita Joshi. Welcome, Namita.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And Namita is a psychology graduate with a master's in education and democracy and a master's in public policy. Her journey with graphology began in 2002, and she later expanded her study through her memberships and networks with the British Institute of Graphologists and the British Psychological Society. Her expertise in democratic practices within education has also kept her engaged with other networks, such as the International Democratic Education Network and the Social Pedagogy Development Network. Namita has just been certified as a document and fingerprint expert by the IEFS, which is the International Forensic Science Institution in India. Congratulations, Namita.
Thank you.
And Namita is a founder of Aatman, a training center of graphology in India. Her diverse range of experiences and her expertise in teaching and applied research has enabled deep learning for students at Aatman. Her career counseling sessions are unique and conducts training programs for institutional departments and provides consultancy services through this venture. I think we have a lot of students from Aatman watching us today, so welcome to all of you. Please put your names through the chat and say hi to the great audience. Let us know if you have any comments or questions. So Namita, what an impressive background. And with that as a backdrop, I can't wait to get in and talk about graphology, a proven reflective tool in human resources. So again, welcome to Grapho Citizen.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah, it's a pleasure having such an amazing experts on this field. So Namita, tell us your story.
I'll tell you the graphology story. I was 15 years old and I had finished my 10th grade examination. And we went out for this day trip kind of a picnic thing. And they had all these different stalls. You know, you have those face painting, mug painting, all those kinds of stalls. And there was one stall there which really caught my eye. It said, get your writing analyzed. And I got really curious. So I went and tried it out. And I was always very interested with anything that is, human behavior related. I had decided pretty early on that I wanted to study psychology. So I absolutely rushed into that stall and tried it out, and I was really shocked at how much they could tell me about my personality. And I think one of them even told me something about my grandmother from my handwriting, which really really shocked me, and that one really stayed. So I decided I've got long vacations coming up anyway, so I'll sign up for the course. And I think a week later I had signed up for the course and I started studying graphology, and the obsession grew. It continued, and it's never left me since then. So that's how I began, the journey with graphology.
That's amazing. So what is graphology?
Ah, actually, in a very common term, people like to call it handwriting analysis, but I do think there is a bit of a fine distinction between the two. But if you look at just the word graphology, you can just break it into two parts and have a much clearer understanding. I mean, logy comes from the word logos, which is the study of, so any subject like psychology, philosophy, it's basically the study of something. And graph is the graph that we create with the hand when we write on paper. It looks like, the heart rate monitor if you have been into a hospital. And basically the study of, the graphs that are created by the hand. So you're interpreting those graphs. And now there's so much extensive research everywhere in the world that, it's brain writing. It's got a lot to do with the brain wiring, and it's very slowly, I think, not going to be a pseudoscience anymore. So I'm very happy about that research coming up in the world. So that's graphology, of course. There's so much in human behavior that needs to be studied, observed, and interpreted. And that's how I like to introduce the word graphology. It's the study of the graphs made by your handwriting.
Yeah, this field of graphology is always amazing because it can entail so many traits and so many applications to our current society and different instances. So
Yeah.
I see this being a fantastic science because graphology is considered a science. So
Yeah.
now let's talk about graphology as a reflective tool and why do you consider graphology as such?
Ah. I'm so glad we're talking about this subject as a reflective tool, because very often it is considered a pseudoscience because it is sort of evaluated on the same parameters that are applied to predictive tools. And there's a whole obsession going on about how everything has to be predictive, and I feel it comes from a very intense human desire to have certainty in life about everything. When something is predictive, then you have a sense of security that, oh, everything's going to be fine. So starting from, the YouTube videos in your feed every day to maybe, your grocery shopping, everything is regulated by AI and everything is predictive and everything is about pattern recognition. But the other way of looking at it is, and I think I'm reminded of this quote, probably by Abraham Lincoln, or it's attributed to many people, but it says the best way to predict the future is to invent it or to create it. And nobody kind of goes backwards and says, let's hack the pattern and, re-anchor and realign. So when you use it as a reflective tool, you are actually using graphology for something that is not pattern based. You're definitely looking at your own patterns, but you're also learning to hack them however you like it. So of course you can use it in a assessment format, and very often it is used in a psychometric tool kind of a fashion. One terminology I think people should stop associating with graphology is a projective technique, because a lot of psychology course books actually I've seen have called it a projective technique, which it is not. It would mean that you're projecting your personality, but I mean, you're a graphologist too, you know this. If you write more than one page, your writing is going to be the most natural. You cannot fake your handwriting, so you can't project anymore. It's the most subconscious part of your personality that will come out, and that is exactly where you're speaking the truth to yourself. And imagine if you could see that truth on paper. It's like standing in front of a mirror, right? You can't run away from your reflection. So
Yeah,
that's the power of having it as a reflective tool.
that's amazing. And is there an opportunity to dive deeper on that by using any samples?
Yeah, I mean, look at sample one, for example. If this sample were, let's say, this person, do you have this first one?
Yes.
Yeah. So in this sample, imagine if this person started learning graphology and they were able to see their own handwriting. Something as simple as just looking at the dip in your handwriting, the descending baseline, it's going downwards on an unruled paper. This can just, be such a important navigational flag, in terms of where your state of mind is right now. If I started writing on paper and my baselines were going downwards, it would be an indicator to me that maybe I'm not as okay as I'm telling myself, or I'm telling others. Maybe I do need to talk to somebody, or maybe I do need to get some kind of help. And it may not obviously be permanent, but if you're writing on a daily basis, even a few lines, you always have an opportunity to kind of track it. You can see if that's happening over and over, and that is something very useful. So if this person were to learn graphology, they would be able to sort of be their own buddy. It's like having a best friend with you all the time and being able to give a feedback mechanism of sorts for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, looking at this sample, it seems
Yeah,
interesting to me. Uh,
yeah,
I don't know if the direction of the writing
yeah, it's
is
straight.
that, or but it goes down. So I
It's
mean,
going down.
there are different
And
aspects that we normally consider when analyzing samples. So, for
yeah,
instance, expansion, coordination, speed,
yes,
pressure, direction, rhythm. Can you let us
right.
know more about what your top observations are about this sample?
See, when I look at this sample, one of the first things that strikes me is the amount of white on the paper, and also if you look at the right side of the page, the margin is not very well utilized. There are clearly some words in there which could have fit in there, but they've gone on to the next line. So that's indicating a very cautious approach, which can be a natural element if you're in a bit of a melancholic state of mind or a depressed state of mind. You're not going to be that risk taking. You will sort of be held, holding back and be a little risk averse, which you can see in the right margins there as well. And something, if I look more closely, I don't know if you can zoom into that, the connections of the writing are very flat. So there, yeah, it is cursive, but it's not having any kind of a loopy shape to it. It's connecting, but in a very flat way. So there's an overall flatness to the writing, which is again going to amplify the melancholic state, because he will be able to connect with people, but on a very surface level. He may have difficulty kind of actually opening up and saying what's on his mind, and that can make you feel more isolated sometimes because you're around people but you can't really share your feelings, and that can have a more detrimental effect of sorts.
Yeah. So I kind of see that the baseline is pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
Does that mean something to you?
I think he would get his tasks done in the day for sure, but the vibe is pretty low. I think the energy level would be, it would just be enough to get the job done, not exactly pouring himself into the task and getting the best output out of it. So this person would need a lot of motivation and understanding, I think, in his daily environment, especially if he's in a workplace. Now imagine if you were this person's team leader or manager and you saw this happening in their writing. You would know how to interact and engage with this person rather than criticizing them and saying, hey, you've not delivered the goals, or you've not shown up enough for the team. Everybody's going through their own battles, and if the leader is in position to understand these nitty-gritties, then it will help you sort of connect with the person differently and engage with them differently.
Yeah. Good. This is an amazing sample. Thanks for walking us through, Namita. All right. So, how individuals, leaders, and employees benefit from graphology as a reflective tool?
Ah, I think in the corporate world specifically, graphology has been used occasionally, but more in, I think, the recruitment area. So some of the best practices within HR, you have of course have recruitment and staffing and succession planning and training development and then retention management. And I think that is an area where it needs to be used more via the learning and development wing, because of course you can use it while recruiting somebody, but today's world is so volatile. We keep calling it that VUCA world, right? I mean, if you remember, there was a report by McKinsey in probably 98, 99. It was called War for Talent, and that's, I think, become relevant even more over the years. You've got an ever changing workplace scenario. You've got gig economies happening. People want their careers to be mobile and boundaryless, and they want to have short term commitments. So it's even more difficult to engage millennials in this kind of an environment. So you want to give them something which is not just about the money. And millennials especially are all about, oh, I want to connect with the vision of the company and I want my purpose to align with it. And that largely comes from them having the luxury of, their base of the pyramid being satisfied, in the Maslow's base of, or the hierarchy of needs, their basics are always taken care of largely. So they're always looking for something more than just, oh, I need a job to survive. So in this kind of a scenario, leaders need to be connecting with their teammates and employees on a very different level. And of course, it's going to be time intensive to use graphology as a reflective tool, but I think somewhere it needs to be prioritized, and I would really push for that because it's never something that's put on the calendar. I mean, through learning and development, you have so many multiple workshops going on, but they'll end up becoming one of those fragmented initiatives of sort, and ultimately people are not able to synthesize the learnings and apply it in their daily life. So maybe you could use graphology as a consistent intervention tool and monitor and track the impact over say a period of 1 year. Maybe do it with one team. That might be more feasible and affordable. So that could be more effective because you want your leaders to be sort of coaches and mentors today, not just bosses. You want you're not always going to be focused on outcomes. They're important, but the process is also important. So there needs to be that blend of the two happening. So you could use it as an intervention system because once you hire somebody, of course retaining them is the biggest challenge today. And if people are going to go off into gig economies, all the more difficult for companies to maintain good talent, and then you lose your competitive edge as well. So you want to use it as a very steady and stable tool in-house so that it's able to have a it's just like the alphabets in the writing being connected to each other in cursive. If the people are not connected by one thread, then it's very difficult for people to have belongingness and ownership. So a lot of the times people they quit companies because of bad bosses or something. That's like the most common thing, right? And bottlenecks are always at the top.
Yeah.
So if you give them a sense of a communal feeling and ownership and belongingness, then they'll stick around longer. I mean, I've seen this happen so many times. People just stay because they like their boss or they like the team, and once that boss has quit, a lot of people quit after that. So that becomes a real problem for retention. So you want to use graphology in a way where everybody is creating a safe space for each other, where they're able to reflect on their strengths, weaknesses, and work with each other to sort of grow together as well. That environment is completely different to constant environment of competition. It's more collaborative.
Yeah, I remember that there was a study made by Gallup, and they found out that 65% of attrition in
Yeah.
organizations is due to bad managers.
Yeah.
So this resonates really clear because
Yeah.
what you just explained, it's true, right? So the way that we
Yeah.
engage with leaders and employees is such an important thing to do for HR practitioners in particular,
Yeah.
or people managers, because there's a huge difference between being a manager versus being a leader.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can
Absolutely.
understand why this reflective tool is such an important component to that. So
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
because just to add to the previous point, because one way in which the reflective aspect of graphology can work wonders is just imagine that scenario when you're having your appraisal, and you're getting feedback from your boss, and that's always one of those uncomfortable kind of spaces. Nobody enjoys that. I don't think even the manager enjoys doing it, and the employee doesn't enjoy it either. Probably not.
yeah,
But imagine if you didn't have to give that appraisal, and if someone had access to, constantly getting that appraisal from themselves. I mean, you can't be mad at yourself for giving you, the truth. And that's one of the most powerful ways in which it can be used as a reflective tool because no one else is telling you that, hey, you need to, learn some time management. It's you who's telling you. and that has a whole other impact. You can either keep lying to yourself, but you know you're lying to yourself.
Yes.
So at some point you will tip over and say, okay, I need to fix this. I have to take ownership of this. You have to take responsibility for yourself, your life, everything. You can't keep running from it.
Yeah, this is such a fantastic combination, Ramita. I've been practicing HR and graphology for so many years now, and I've seen so many value out of it. So
Yeah.
this is great information, great content, and hopefully, for those HR practitioners that are watching us today, this is helpful. And in the case that you are interested in learning more about it, please feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah.
So I'm projecting this other sample, Namita. What are your immediate observations here?
Oh, wow. Um, well, this person could come off as very intelligent, owing through if you see the writing, it's quite thready. And in first impressions, if you interact with the person, they can come across as very intelligent. But if you get to know them a little more, uh, I would say they have quite some amount of trouble to, be productive through the day, because there's no amount of consistency in the slant of the writing or the size of the writing. Even the line quality is not very stable. The rhythm of the writing is quite disturbed as well. So it's kind of disturbed, and they may have trouble, sort of keeping themselves on track or finishing the tasks and goals. And emotionally as well, they could be a bit of a roller coaster, because they'll probably always need somebody to talk to process their own thoughts and emotions. They won't be able to do it with themselves. And both of these are important at different stages in life, but for the most part, you can, take opinions from people and then, or feedback from people, and eventually you process them by yourself. But this person may have trouble sort of processing it, by herself. I think it's a she. Yeah.
Hmm. Well,
So,
when we talk about connections, we mean rounded, like Arland, arcade,
yeah,
angular, or thread-like. So this is a super thready
very
sample.
thready.
And what does that mean? I mean, I just want to let the great audience know about what
Ah.
this thread-like means.
The threading, as we know it, the thready writing, it pretty much looks like a running thread. In fact, in our regional language, we have a word for this. For those watching, in Marathi, you call it dhaudora. So it's the way you weave something, even when you're actually working on, a piece of cloth. But this is leaving out and tapering ends of the words. So you're leaving out the last few letters, and the person's thoughts are kind of running faster than what they can express on paper. So very often they may have a rush of ideas, but they're not able to communicate it to somebody else or even to themselves. There's just too much happening up there, and it's all too intense. And then that same energy gets intense, and then it dissipates. It's never channelized, so it's very difficult for this person to articulate their thoughts or express themselves very clearly, emotionally as well. And the ideas can also lack some detailing because it's going so fast. So the speed would naturally be higher if you're going into a thready pattern.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's always fascinating to analyze samples and understand what's behind those,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
All
Now, if
right.
this person were a team leader, I would find it really amusing if she was able to communicate the targets and the goals clearly to people. Maybe three of them know it, and the remaining three don't know, and then there's miscommunication happening all the time. And she probably thought that she communicated it, but she forgot about it. This kind of stuff can happen a lot with this writing.
Yeah. Again, I think that using graphology in the HR field is such an amazing advantage. We
Yeah.
can easily identify who those top players are, who those leaders
Yeah.
are, and
Yes.
as a reflective tool, we can determine what could be the strengths or potentially the weaknesses or
Yeah.
any other personality traits for either candidates or employees or including leaders.
Yes. Absolutely.
Amazing. Okay, well, so how graphology can help individuals, leaders, and employees have a better self understanding?
Um, it kind of goes with what I mentioned earlier, because I think if you're using it as an intervention tool, it obviously has to extend to everybody and not just the subordinates or the team members. Maybe you could make it a bit of a compact training program for people in leadership areas, because I mean, time is of course always a constraint, but if you prioritize it, then it can happen. So it's like that saying, if it's important, your calendar will reflect it. So I want to see this, kind of prioritized within the HR space or by the HR departments. That is something that I really, really wish to see, because I think it can have a very different kind of turnaround for all the teams. And most often, teams are working in a decentralized kind of pattern. So it's not so hard to do, because if you can just create the impact for that small, cell, then eventually all the cells of the body learn to work together. So you just kind of have a domino effect if you do it even with one team, and then if you see that this team is performing well, then you'll also generate curiosity and enthusiasm, and say, well, what is that team doing differently? And not necessarily in a competitive way, but just a curious way, that how is this person so happy? And that's the thing with well-being. So if you use it as an intervention, the impact evaluation later on should not just be focused on productivity, because I mean we do that all the time. We have way too many parameters and metrics to measure productivity, but I would like to see them measure the well-being of the person. So, a happy person is so visible and their vibe is contagious. So, if you meet a happy person, it kind of rubs off on everybody else. And that is the kind of effect we're trying to create. So, the impact evaluation also needs to look at this side of things, not just the outcome. So, process is very important. And of course, it's time consuming, but it's worth the time. And who knows, right? I mean, look at the world today. The pandemic has turned everything upside down without any warnings. So everything that we have been holding so close to our heart and saying, no, it has to be done exactly this way, and these are our systems and processes, and we can't change them. But what happened eventually? One pandemic comes and hits us, and you have to let go of everything just like that. And that's also a lesson, that you need to let go quickly. We can't stay attached to I do things only this way, and that's how it's going to work. So for leaders as well, that adaptability is very, very effective. That fluidity and flexibility. And if they're flexible, then that will also show in the way they engage with their team and allow them kind of some elasticity when it comes to productivity. It gives them more flexibility, because that will enable the autonomy.
Yeah, I find fascinating these observations that you just mentioned, Amita, and utilizing graphology in HR um, has different approaches and different traits. I mean, in the US, we consider graphology as another tool to assess talent. But I understand that there are different legal implications, and you can see that in so many other
Yeah.
countries. There are
Yeah.
some countries where we can practice graphology with more freedom and with a bigger scope of application to the field. But
Yes.
what's been your experience about that?
Yeah, and I think you pointed that out very right, because very rightly, because in India, I think it gets quite bureaucratic. I don't think people have the kind of flexibility and freedom that you would have. I mean, even let's say there are two people who are working in India itself, but one is working for an American company or a European company, and one is working for an Indian company. The way we sort of see productivity is very different. In an Indian system, it's very, you have to work these many number of hours. It has to be 9 to 6, and you can see that even in the way that universities are run out here. It's always, I mean, that's where the labor is being created, right? So you see the trickle down effect coming. They mutually reinforce each other of sorts. So that flexibility is not there in the way that the Indian work culture operates, and I wish that would change, because on the one hand, leaders and managers want their employees to kind of produce more and yield more, uh, effects and outcomes. But that's not going to happen until and unless you leave that kind of project or task onto them as their responsibility. That ownership needs to be with them, and that happens when you give people flexibility. And I think remote working is doing that to some extent. People are able to sort of get better with it. There are different kind of challenges with remote working, especially those who have kids. HR is kind of struggling to figure that out right now. But yeah, it's very difficult because there are too many, bureaucratic hoops to jump through, I think.
Yeah, well, it's such an amazing discussion, and we can debate for hours. Namita, that you
Yeah.
mentioned about kids. Graphology also analyzes
Oh, yeah.
samples of kids, and that's another
Oh,
field of
oh, that's
expertise. But
amazing.
well, we can probably talk about it in the next podcast after. So
Sure, sure.
let me share this other sample that you graciously provided to me. So, what are your quick observations about this sample? Can you see my screen?
Not yet. Which number is it?
This is number 3.
Number three. Ah, this is an interesting one. This actually reminds me a lot of some of the Korean students that used to write in school. They tend to have this kind of writing, and they're also awfully good with art. But you see this disconnection happening in the writing. I mean, it's quite likely that this person at work may, put up these kind of artistic post-its or probably some kind of doodle sketches as reminders instead of writing it down. It's quite a possibility. But this is an interesting sample because I think for this kind of a person, they might function better in any kind of solo roles, which are not really very people oriented domains and sectors, because they're very kind of disconnected. And you see the disconnect everywhere in the writing. There's no cursive connection happening. So the letters are not joined to each other, and there's quite some disconnection happening. So they're not exactly people who will, come across as the affable types. So you'll see them in a group, but they will be sort of reserved in one sense. So this person might perform better in a role that is maybe like a hacker or a coder who doesn't really have to do too much, people interaction and too much talking, because they might have problems there. You see, the kind of space between the words as well is pretty wide, and I think towards the end of the page, which is not in this section, it gets wider. So the more they get through the day, they want to be left alone even more to recharge their batteries. So quite evidently, he's more of an introvert personality, you know. So I would not really place them in a people oriented kind of a task or uh, maybe even role. If they're picking a profession, I would in terms of career counseling, I would think of it that way. Assess the kind of professional choice based on what your personality wiring is.
Yeah, I I see this a very interesting sample. Um, there are lots of spaces
Lots of
in between
spaces.
words, in between letters, and one
Yeah,
trait that is uh, is really interesting to observe is that the last letters of the sentences are falling apart. So look, N
yes,
goes down, the E goes down, the H goes down,
yeah,
every single letter goes down. What does
yeah.
that mean, Namita?
Well, in one sense, we call them what we call what is it? Quitting, kind of the quitting kind of a baseline. But if I look at the whole page here, he has I think one or two spots where he has done this. Yeah, just a few. That is something I might actually look at as a red flag because it could indicate that they're enthusiastic about something they're doing, and then eventually, by the time they hit the end of the task, they sort of feel like I'll just give it up. Or there's a kind of release which is indicating that the entire line that has gone from left to right before that, before the drop in the letter, is probably it has probably been carried out in a way that has natural tension to it in terms of the task that they would be doing. Because if they're feeling like they need to release some kind of a burden at the end of that line, then they've definitely been feeling like they're carrying a burden, and that can be definitely something that as a manager or leader you might want to talk to them about. That could be something on the personal front for the person that they're going through, and that's playing at the back of their mind, and that kind of stuff. So it's a bit of a, I'm not sure they might fully complete the task. They might get to the absolute end, but just that last finishing touch might be missing.
Hmm. Yeah. In comparison with the other sample, the baseline is going up all the time.
Yeah.
And I am observing here something interesting about the letter I. So
Ah.
there's a different trait here for this, which
Yeah.
is super important to call out, but
Yes.
I will let you explain more about what's happening with these eyes.
Yeah, actually, this I is, I mean, the Roman I is how in Indian script generally how we tend to write or learn to write, the personal pronoun I as well. But you see, there's a small knotting that is happening at the bottom of the I. So the second part, the bottom, the one that you were sort of circling,
Uh-huh.
and that's also sort of showing a certain kind of conflict of interest for the person with maybe a father figure in their life. It could be their own father, or it could be the boss itself. It could probably even represent to the boss that, okay, maybe this person has an issue with me if I'm in the leadership position. Doesn't matter what gender you are. It's just the position of authority, and that could be an indicator that, okay, maybe we need to make amends and fix some things here. And that I can be an indicator of that. And if the lines are going upwards like you mentioned, and then they're dipping down, then it could be even probably more serious than we might have thought earlier. Because people who are depressed and who take drastic kind of actions very often are always the ones that people feel are, oh, she was normal just yesterday. You don't see anything unusual, and that's exactly the kind of snap that happens. It's very quick. So, of course, this is always in potential. You can't really say that that is what the person will choose to do tomorrow, but we're looking at probability here. So,
Mm.
when you're looking at the patterns of personality, then you're giving out probabilistic interpretations of what this person is most likely going to do. If they choose to not do it, of course, great. But, that's again a red flag that, you can tick mark on the sample.
Yeah. Yeah, the flow of this handwriting is broken, and
Yeah.
we can see letters that are being put apart. For instance, this P of skip.
Yes.
These are
Segmented.
sorry, go ahead.
So the P is pretty segmented. It looks like a stencil has been used to make the P. So there's quite some. I would think that this person could be a bit clumsy as well, with the neuromuscular coordination may not be that great, in terms of gross motor skills. So maybe they drop stuff a lot, or they land up falling down a lot. So that could also be indicated in their decision making, not just physically. So it could be sudden impulsive decisions happening, which can be tricky.
Yeah. Wow, this is so fascinating, Namita.
We
So
should just do like a round of, yeah.
this is such an amazing discussion. So, how graphology as a proven reflective tool can be used in HR? Anything else that you would like to expand on this field?
I think we're using it quite nicely in recruitment, but I kind of see a very loose flow chart in my head. If I focus on, let's say, using it as a reflective tool through the learning and development wing in-house. Let's say you have an in-house graphologist for your company who is offering training for your employees, so that there's a consistent impact. And then eventually when the well-being increases, then you are sort of generating a very natural way of retaining employees as well. And once you retain them well, it becomes easier for the company to invest in them as well. then your only kind of worry might be that you don't want other companies to poach them. You don't want them to poach the talent that you invested in, which is always a worry with HR and companies. Because I think that happened once with was it Bank of America poaching a lot of employees from GE. I think that happened once. So that is always a threat. But like I said, even if you create a very wonderful work environment, then it's less likely for a competitor to poach them, because money is clearly not the only thing people are working for. And Maslow, I think there should be like a Maslow's poster everywhere in every companies, because it's literally playing out on a daily basis. Once you have satisfied their base of the pyramid, you give them incentives, you give them whatever rewards. Eventually, if you're not in people dynamics where you have a boss who is also going to be a mentor to you and who helps you grow as an individual, people will not stick around. And one thing I want to really sort of mention here from my personal experience, there are some leaders that I have worked with and I've seen the skill with them. The biggest skill they have is love. And I don't think that people see love as a skill enough. Whether it's HR or whether it's schools and children, love is a skill. It is not a noun, it's a verb. So I've seen these kind of leaders just practice love so effortlessly that the kind of impact they have on people is, so great that very often their subordinates would be like, I don't even care if you pay me. I'll just do it. Just tell me what you want me to do. It's that kind of impact, because that is the amount of belongingness they feel, and the amount of community feeling you feel with somebody. And there's so much joy in just being able to do that work. You don't really care whether they'll pay you or not, or you won't really go into that trap of, they're paying me so much, I'm not sure, is that how much I should get more than this. And that whole dialogue that goes on in your mind, you're in a completely different mind space when you have people like that as your leaders and bosses. And that, I think, really needs to be cultivated, which can happen only gradually and slowly, when people go through that transitional pipeline, starting from, let's say, someone entering a company as maybe a 25-year-old, and then staying with the same company for probably 20 years. You need to have been able to give them the kind of space, the kind of training where they're able to develop love as a skill. And that's just super important. Like, that really needs to, because we kept saying that time is a constraint, but actually love is time. So if you're doing love, you're saving time. You will save a lot of time if you are practicing love as a skill. You won't have trouble with putting it on your calendar and, I have to do this, because it's so fluid that you're just executing it on the go with everything you do. It's not a separate task you do, it's just the way it is, right? And that I think is something I would love to see in workplaces.
Yeah, you just hit the nail right in the head, Namita, with love. I mean, going back to Maslow's needs, I mean, love is in there.
Yeah.
And now organizations are finding different ways to manage people, to retain people. We've seen a lot of attrition for the last couple of months due to the pandemic and
Yeah.
some other external factors. So organizations, leaders are seeking opportunities to understand what should be improved, what should be changed in
Yeah.
order to retain and attract talent. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting that you mentioned love, because uh, there are new positions that are also being created among organizations, and I have to share this with you. Uh, I saw the other day one position that it was the chief officer of love. So
Really?
yes,
Wow, this is awesome.
so we have new positions in organizations, and they are fully dedicated to understand all the psychology, all the behaviors, and all the different practices to have
That's awesome.
specific cultures in organizations, and keep those traits in those organizations. So
Wow.
I find this so fascinating. And, when you mentioned love, that resonated really. quickly.
That's awesome. I'm completely imagining this chief officer of love with, like, when you have those office parties, you have these funny clown thingies and stuff wearing. I'm imagining this one wearing a halo around her head or his head.
Yeah,
That'd be an awesome
you
too.
would be fascinated of so many positions that have been created after this pandemic or during this
That's
pandemic.
amazing.
So
It's fluid.
yeah,
It's changing so fast. I mean, that's exactly what I meant. You can't keep doing the same thing and expect different results. I mean, definition of insanity, right? So
yeah. So I would probably apply for one of those chief love officer roles in the future.
awesome. Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, and well, to our greater audience, thank you for being with us today. And Guru Nath Joshi, thank you for your comment. Yeah, this is amazing. The level of knowledge and expertise that Namita is sharing with us is fantastic. And well, probably I will I will share the last sample, Namita, number
Awesome.
4. I
Okay,
think
let me get it
that
out.
we are getting to the top of the hour, so
Yeah.
please share all your expertise with us.
Yeah, this is almost the full page. I just had to cut off a bit of the top portion because it had names in there. But this is quite a busy sample. I mean, if you look at the entire A4 paper, there were quite a number of lines on this page. So this is one of those people that, if you assign them a lot of tasks in the day, including, you see the right margin, it's utilized quite a bit. So this would be your get it done guy. He would definitely do a lot of the tasks through the day and can make a very good subordinate. I think this is one of those people that connected. Yeah, I thought
Yeah,
I lost connection.
yeah,
Yeah,
you're back.
so I wouldn't pitch this guy in a leadership position per se, as much as they may be harboring, a desire to be in a leadership position. Owing to the size of the writing, it's almost on the medium large size, but I think they might have trouble in being, something on the CEO level or CXO level, but they might be a good team leader. So something on a more decentralized platform where they're probably leading smaller teams, that might be more effective for this person. The only thing I would worry about for this person is, again, the dipping baselines, because he's clearly unhappy about something in his life right now, and probably he has some kind of pressures. Maybe it's financial pressures or any kind of emotional pressures which we can see elsewhere. But yeah, I think that would be something I would have a conversation with this person about. Like, is there something that's kind of troubling them or bothering them? Otherwise, I think they would be pretty productive. They would get a lot of tasks done, and they're also quite social. If you see the zones of the writing, most of it is in the middle zone. So likes to be in the social area, so he would do well with his teammates as well. He's, not very good at expressing his emotions, maybe, but can connect with people nonetheless because they like being in the social zone. They might attend all the work parties, or they might meet their colleagues outside work as well. That kind of a person. So definitely, can do well with people. The slant can be a little bit wavy. I think in a few places, I don't know if it's visible in the scan, but yeah, there's a bit of a restraint seen in this person again, which could just indicate that they might have, a bit of, they have their walls up, and it might take some time to get to know the person. But once you do, he's pretty much a straight arrow. He's not too difficult in that sense.
How about the pressure, the tension that you observe in this handwriting?
Ah, yeah. So from what I'm seeing here, the pressure is almost in the medium range, which again goes to speak about him being more appropriate as a manager or a team leader than at the CXO level. Because if his pressure was something on the heavier front, then I would say, yeah, okay, this person's drive is pretty strong, and they would perform well at the CXO level. But this one pretty much is more with the routine stuff. So he would do well with a smaller team. He can keep targets on track. He can keep people on track through his general people skills, and can get through the day. Whatever targets he has set for himself, whatever routine he has going on for himself, he can pretty much uh, perform to that.
Good. And any simplification of forms here
Ah, yes.
observed?
Well, this writing actually, I would give you a cultural hint, because my guess is that this person's first language is not English, and he's probably gone to a school in India which did not have English as his medium of instruction. So, very often, what happens is, because people are learning in regional languages, when they tend to write in English later on, they have writing that is not cursive. So, this kind of writing is very, very commonly seen in India, where you have disconnected script, very often because English is not their first language and they probably studied in regional language. So the form can look simplified for that one reason as well, because of the cultural implication as well. Like what we would call as class characteristics, right? So this would be pretty much class characteristics for Indian English handwriting.
Yeah, good. So you mentioned that this is a pretty much middle zone writing.
Yeah.
Um, how about the lower zone? I mean, there's no, I can't see anything about the
Yeah.
other zones very well.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So in the writing, we have three zones, and a good visual to have for that is, you can think of it as, your body. So this is like your upper zone, and then your middle zone, and then below your abdomen is the lower zone. So writing also needs to be spread across the three zones. So in school, when we had the four-lined book, it was meant to train us to sort of reach into all zones. And I think that has changed a lot over time, because if you look at the previous cursive handwriting, whether it was Denielian or the Palmer method, but even if we see some of the olden scripts, that we find from the time that the British were ruling India, you see a lot of the writing has beautiful zones and it is slanting to the right. The slant was interestingly always to the right, but the zones were always well developed. Whereas in today's times, if you look at modern handwriting, zones are not very often well developed, because people like to think of life as, I want to just live in the moment. And the middle zone is where the moment is. If you think of this, imagine if you're thinking of the moment as, I just want to feed my system and process it and get done with it. So, quite literally speaking, the food you eat is, your intake for the vehicle. You're putting it down here and it gets processed in the middle zone and then it's out of the system again. This is what we're doing on a daily basis, which is the middle zone of the writing. If I can't draw an A, then I cannot draw a D or a G. So it's focusing on, just for today I want to get done with my tasks, and just for today I want to do this. It's not a very long term visionary kind of thinking. It's very, right now this is my goal, you know
Yeah, they live only the present. They
yeah,
don't care about what
yeah,
can happen tomorrow. So
yes,
that's very
once,
very well reflected on this middle zone, right?
yeah.
Wow.
And you see that all written there in the result in all times. So it's almost like the A and both the L's are in the same zone. There's no zone happening there. It's just they're all in the same zone.
Yeah. So the upper zone is pretty much non-existent.
Yeah,
What we can see is some presence of the lower zone.
yeah.
And what does that mean to you?
Well, with the why specifically, since we look at why more for the monetary aspects, this is the why that is pretty much stuck in the lower zone. So there's probably some kind of financial target that this person is working towards. So maybe that is something that is bothering the person. I would read that together and say that the dip in the baselines, which is indicating that the person is stressed about something or upset about something or having a tough time or tough phase going on, could be indicative of maybe something financial in his life right now.
Um, the other thing that caught my attention are the GGs. So if you look these
Yeah.
strokes, there's a big loop here, but there are some other Gs that they don't have
Yeah.
anything back up
Yeah.
here.
They're quite inconsistent. And thankfully, he's written 2 pages. So I'm looking more at the second page now. Second page is always going to give the better kind of reflection. Yeah, the G is pretty inconsistent and kind of, left incomplete in most of the spaces. So, in terms of energy, or in terms of, even kinetic energy with the G, it's not consistent. He might have bursts of energy and say that, oh, today I'm going to finish everything on my, to-do list. And then after a few hours, you might feel, okay, this was a lot. I should take a break. So it's kind of erratic if you see the energy spread of the person.
Hmm.
I mean, ink is energy at the end of the day, right? I mean, literally energy coming out of the pen. And if it's not consistent across the page or the paper, then you can see where it is dipping or dying down.
Yeah, we normally see specific traits for the lower zone, which are probably reflected
Yeah,
in drivers. So
yeah,
good. All
yeah. I was
right.
skirting around that one.
Yeah. Well, so what an amazing conversation, Amita,
Yeah,
today.
I think we
Thank
could go
you.
on analyzing.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to continue having this conversation, and we are at the top of the hour, and I can't
Yeah.
thank you enough for taking the time to share all your expertise today, Namita, and it's
No,
always
thank
great to
you.
have these conversations, very productive conversations with such an amazing practitioners like yourself, and
No,
we
I
have gained
must.
great insight from you.
Oh, thank you. I have to actually first begin by thanking Sheila since she connected us. And then I must thank you because, it's always so useful to have something to look forward to. And times have been pretty tough in India. So it's nice to have something, when you see it in your calendar, you're like, oh, we've got this coming up. So that's always a nice thing. So thank you for that. It's been
Yeah,
great. It was fun.
absolutely, and also to the greater audience, thanks for watching us. And please follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and give us the gift of feedback. If you like
Yes.
this podcast, give us some reviews, some likes, or some comments. And always make sure to double check what's happening in our website at hrcitizen.com for the latest on HR and graphology. And you'll find recent content on the blog. So if
Yeah.
you are ready for a discovery session, send us an email to hrhelp at hrcitizen.com. And well, Namita, again, thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
truly
Thank you.
enjoyed this conversation today.
Likewise. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you, and be safe. And until next time.
Yep. Bye.